This is day one of being homeless. Took me about 6 days in a trailer park before I became homeless. Before I lost my mind. No. Um, the guy that I was living with, he was abusing his dog. And at some point I kind of had to just confront him about it, which was not smart. There's a couple other ways that I could have gone about addressing the situation, but the simplest one was just like, hey dude, like, what are you doing? And he was not open to the hey dude. Of course, a person who acts like a petty, pathetic tyrant over an animal, the moment he is actually challenged with his sovereignty over that animal, he's just gonna flip out. So he, got in my face and he was trying to fight me. And he's 55 and he's got, I guess, a hernia. So if I were to actually fight this guy and he gets injured, right, because he's a petty tyrant, he's gonna sue me. He's, litigious for all the bravado that he has, all the machismo. If he actually had consequences, physical consequences for his machismo, he would resort to other means to get revenge, simply because he is the kind of person that seeks revenge. There is a certain kind of person who will seek revenge. And it makes me wonder, because the idea of the villain in, I guess, like medieval history, like the term villain itself, as far as I know, comes from vilain, which is the French, which basically means peasant or peasant rebel or something akin to that, or like brigand or marauder. Interestingly enough, Murad also comes from, I believe it was the last name of a commander during the beginning of the 30 Years' War, where he was totally callous and he basically just let his men run rampant throughout the countryside, looting and pillaging and R-wording and other stuff like that. So Murad comes from his name, also French, so villain, Murad, villain. But there is a particular kind of cruelty that was noticed by the aristocracy when it comes to people who are of the lower class and they finally get some kind of power. They basically, they become villains. So the man that I met was the villain. And of course you could say that's projection from the aristocracy, because just take one look at Marquis de Sade. Of course there's going to be villains among the aristocracy as well. But it does make me wonder if there's something that goes on with higher breeding, with higher learning. Obviously, the higher your IQ, as far as I know, generally speaking, the greater your empathy. Of course, if you have certain religions like Christianity, or religiosity, your faith is also going to increase empathy to a point, because if you are too faithful, if you are fundamentalist, then you are going to be callous towards those who are not of the same faith. In this, in the case of Christianity, right, because we have 10,000 different denominations, that's going to be, it's going to be callousness based on confession, we could say. It took me 5 videos of me not saying anything before I actually had the courage to speak into a camera for YouTube, which is very interesting, because I don't normally consider myself to be socially anxious. I just don't like posting online. And yet sometimes I feel like vlogging, it seems like vlogging is, it's the method of actually connecting with people these days. It's the method of actually getting your ideas out there. if there is any way for me to actually generate income outside of my current job, because even though I'm homeless, I do have a job, believe it or not. I'm an electrician. Even outside of my job, if I can make income doing this, then I think it's going to be good. And also because I read a lot. There's a lot of things that I like to talk about that I can't talk about with people in my day-to-day life just because they don't care. And that is, I think, the one beauty of the internet is that you can truly find people who do care, even if the connection that you have with them is actually sort of a it's like a false connection, like it's like a pseudo connection. Because I've found that going to like Discords and stuff, I've never really gotten to the point where I've befriended somebody on the Discord, even though we have similar interests and we talk about things. It's lacking the human component, the face-to-face component. There is an actual bonding mechanism that happens at the subconscious level when you are talking to somebody face-to-face, and I believe that is more powerful than talking to somebody over type, in the case of Discord, or even voice chat if you're playing like a video game. Although I will say that, it seems like men and women bond differently. If you're a man and you're running with the wolf pack, so to say, in a competitive video game, that is obviously going to bond you tremendously, especially if you know the person face to face. But if you don't know them face to face, there's always going to be a slight divide. And if you look at the work of Jason Reza Georgiani, as he's compiling all of these, I guess stats, or not really stats, but like these sort of facts, if you want to call it facts, because I'm sure each of the facts that he brings up, you could probably dispute them if you were to break down the minutiae. But all of the facts that he compiles about psychical phenomena, it makes me wonder if there is something as telepathy. I've experienced this as somebody, I play bass guitar. I'm not sure for how much longer. It's not like I can exactly practice in this state, unfortunately. But I'm in a band, and there is a moment when you're playing that you really snap into sort of the groove, especially as a bassist, where you kind of find the pocket. And over time, as you develop an ability to play with somebody else, it does make me wonder if there is an element of telepathy that goes on with that kind of activity. And you could say the same thing, like maybe it's going to be less so if you're on like a movie set, like if there's a sort of telepathy going on between the director and the actor, especially if they have sort of quote-unquote chemistry. Right, that chemistry could be taking place, literally at the level of the brain, where just people naturally, they harmonize with each other based on personality, based on, especially if you're creative, right, everybody's going to have a different sort of creative method. Right, if the creative methods jive, then it's just going to work together. But it could also be that there is some kind of psychic bonding. And I also take the position of Jason Reza Georgiani, where he says basically his understanding of metaphysics is non-dual. And I would say the same thing. If there is going to be something such as the psychic world, or the forms, or this greater energy, right, it's going to be Heraclitean in the sense, I hope I got that word right, Heraclitean in the sense that everything is in flux, everything is connected in continuums, perhaps a polyvalent set of continuums, but everything is connected, perhaps as a three-dimensional rainbow. It probably doesn't make that much sense, but things are connected. And if there is this unexplained phenomenon, it's simply because we have not found a way to integrate it, given the current paradigm and narrative of science and human understanding. And, faith, the power of faith is extraordinary, and it really does change people. And you could say that that's a self-fulfilling prophecy in the sense of, like, I believe there's God, therefore I'm going to listen to the Bible and abide by it. And if you're Jordan Peterson, you would say that the wisdom in the Bible is such that if you do have faith, you do abide by it, your life will improve. And I'm not necessarily going to contradict that, because I think the Bible specifically, if you read it with the right amount of metaphor, not necessarily complete metaphor, but the right kind of fluidity, that fluidity plus the strong adherence that you get with faith, I mean, it really does transform people. I wish in some respects that I could be Christian, but I've tried to put that hat on so many times. I've even converted to Islam, so I guess you'd call me an apostate, but I've just tried the Abrahamic faiths. I've even tried the faiths of, like I've tried Hinduism, although not nearly as much as the other two, the Abrahamic faiths. And it just doesn't do it for me, man. I think that there absolutely is a God. I think angels are real. I think demons are real. But once again, going back to the metaphysics of Giorgiani, I don't necessarily think that these things are beyond the material, or if they are beyond the material. And so if you think about like I guess like think about an engine, right? You can have a component of the engine, such as, perhaps the, let's say the radiator, right? So the radiator is part of the engine complex. The radiator plugs into the engine itself in the sense that it has to, one sec, I need to shut my window. In the sense that it has to pump coolant throughout the engine. I hope you guys can hear me. I apologize about this. It has to pump coolant throughout the engine. If it's pumping coolant throughout the engine, right, it is both part of the engine, but not necessarily part of the engine, because it's not actually part of the pistons, right? It's not part of the firing mechanism that produces internal combustion. So it could be that our material reality is adjacent to the firing mechanism, and that the angels and demons exist within the fire, in these greater spheres, if you want to call it that. But ultimately, we are still connected with that, and there would be some kind of connection that is based upon physicality between us and that, right? So it's not like there truly is a divided world of forms, and this is illusory. Although, with metaphysics, it's very, very difficult with I'm an empiricist of my epistemology, in the sense that I think that everything is an approximation, and the only reason why we take something as fact is because it's a practical fact, right? If I drop an apple 1,000 times, it's always going to fall. Now, when I make the claim always, it's a practical term, because practically speaking, it will always fall. But I don't know for sure that it, the 1,001th time or whatever, it will. I'm simply practically taking it as a fact. So all facts are practical. So in that sense, right, I can gather data from the world around me, and I can say, hey, you know what? Probably the world of forms as understood by Plato doesn't exist. However, right, I could be wrong. Right? The lack of evidence is not necessarily lack of existence or lack of proof. Although I will say that, that if you're going to adopt my epistemology, there's going to be gradients of practical truth or practical fact. And I can make a claim that it's much more likely to be true that there is no world of forms than there is, simply because I do have evidence of a physical world. I do have also evidence, right, going back to Giorgiani's work, there is evidence of psychical influence within this physical realm. Now, I have evidence that everything else in this physical realm is causal, based on other physical properties. It makes no sense that this would be something beyond or transcendent. It would be novel. That's not to say that it's not the case, but it would be unique. That jump would be unique. And it would make a lot more sense if this sort of psychic influence and ability if that was actually part of the fabric of reality itself, and therefore even if we are just a radiator, in this sort of analogy, you could even think of it like an organ, but I like the idea of with the engine, it's outside of the actual engine block itself, right? So we could be adjacent to the firing of reality, but we're still part of it. We are still part of the same, perhaps, material, or we are still part of, right? If you think about the universe and how large it is, it's very possible that as the farther you go from where we are, it could be, if this is a simulation, that the laws of physics break down. Maybe like you literally just can't leave because this is a simulation, right? But then, even if this is a simulation, or I could just say it's not, because once again, going back to my epistemology, everything is about functionality. Functionally, this is real. Functionally, I'm homeless. Functionally, that guy wanted to fight me. And he probably would have, if I actually fought him, since I'm bigger than him, not only would I probably would have injured him, and he would have sued me, he could have shot me, since he's kind of a psycho fuck. I shouldn't have sworn there, right there. I'm going to have to edit that out. He's a psycho effer, right? But basically I lost my train of thought. Talking about that I was homeless, and it's real. Psychic abilities. Well, it just everything's functional, right? So it just makes more sense that I could provide causal evidence and prior example. There's no reason to assume that something novel such as the realm of forms is true. And that this is what I was getting at, right? So we're in the universe. If I were to leave where I am spatially, right, there's no reason to assume that, past the point of observance, what we can observe in the universe, if we were to go past that point, that things are necessarily the same. Of course, obviously, we have examples of continuity here. What's once again going back to my epistemology means that it's likely that it's going to be continuous there as well, but we don't necessarily know that, especially with the mysteries of the universe, such as dark energy and dark matter, which basically, all that means is that the physicists who actually are trying to figure this stuff out have no clue. Dark sounds fancy and it sounds like it's a thing, but literally it just means that it's not a thing. It just means that it's matter that ought to be there, and it's energy that ought to be there. We're not sure where it is, right? So, given the continuity of the physical world at the Newtonian level that we experience, right? And even at I'll say at the quantum level, because obviously we have quantum machines, or not quantum machines, but like we have ways of manipulating manipulating the world at the quantum level such that we can be pretty sure that our model is approximating reality, once again at the functional level. We have continuity here at both of those scales. So we could assume that it's the same at other places, but at the same time, right, we also have examples of our models, our approximations, being misaligned with the nature of the cosmos at scale. And it could be that there is a third realm of physics that once again behaves differently, like quantum stuffs. And I'm not a physicist, I'm an electrician, but quantum stuffs that actually has its own properties, and it's only when considering these three domains together would you achieve some kind of picture of everything. These three major models, one is the cosmos truly at scale, and that's how you get basically the curvature and the stability of our galaxy, the Milky Way, and other I guess phenomenon that can't be explained without like dark matter or whatever. But I really need notes for this. Well, this is my first my first vlog. I'm homeless. kind of flip from topic to topic here. You gotta start somewhere, I guess. I will leave. God, what book was it? It was either Anna Karenina or it was the Brothers Karamazov. I can't remember what it was. Man, God, I really think it was Anna Karenina, but this is like a scene that would make a lot more sense in the Brothers Karamazov. But basically, the horse was being whipped to death in a nightmare. I think either a memory or a dream that happened with one of the characters. Anyways, that scene, like just the raw impression of that kind of cruelty to animals remained with me. And now the incident that I had with the guy who was trying to fight me, the villain, that stuck with me a lot. And it reminded me of that. I hope I can get this resolved. I'm just gonna post every day. I just want to start vlogging because I feel like maybe I can make a parasocial relationship with some fools that'll give me money on Patreon because I can be entertaining. I hope that I can do that. That would be really nice. Thank you. See you later. Jubal O'Hannigan is gonna try and get some sleep. Good night.